Hi. The Big Short was a 2005 movie that won the 2016 Oscar for Best Writing for an Adapted Screenplay. That means that there had been a book that was out there and then it was adapted into a movie script. It deals with the housing bubble of 2008 that very few people saw it coming, uh, but those who did profited from it greatly. These people were kind of like Cassandra from Greek mythology. They were cursed to be able to foretell the future, and no one would believe them. Now, Christian Bale plays Dr. Michael Burry, who's a medical doctor who was really good at picking stocks, and he made a small fortune from it. And a company called Metro Capital gave him a portfolio to invest, and that he had really sole discretion on how he was going to invest in. And he kept looking at the housing market, the housing market. He looked at what happened to the housing market during the Depression. He looked at the increase in the housing prices, and it just seemed quite unsustainable. And he started doing research on that, and he really wanted to bet against the housing market, which nobody was doing. Steve Carell plays Mark Baum, who has what he calls an amazing nose for BS. And then his brother died by suicide, and he had this tremendous anger management issue. You can see him basically taking over an anger management meeting, just really disregarding everybody that's there. He's just very focused on himself. Ryan Gosling plays this really kind of smarmy Jared Vanette character who brings this crazy deal, effectively shorting the housing market, to Steve Carell, the Mark Baum character, in his boutique firm. Now, what was happening is that firms or banks were packaging a lot of crappy mortgages together. And the theory was, even though they're really bad mortgages with a high chance of default for each individual mortgage, if you put them all together, then voila, suddenly they were now AAA rated. And Anthony Bourdain had a really interesting analogy of that. He explained it by using a fish analogy. He said that fish that didn't sell today, they put it into a seafood stew and sold it at a really good price the next day. He said, oh, it's not old fish, it's something new. And that's really how the housing market was kind of packaged. Now, Mark Baum, the Steve Carell character, and his team, they go to Florida to investigate, well, what's really happening with these, with the housing market there. And they see that there's lots and lots of vacant houses. They go and talk to strippers who are buying 2, 3, 4, 5 housing units and then renting them and using them for investment purposes. And they're saying they really are very unsustainable. Two of the mortgage brokers they find down there, again, are kind of smarmy characters who would write up to 60. What kind of resources the people had. They called them ninja loans. No income, no jobs, effectively no problem. Have we got a loan for you? And what they would do is there'd be these very small, low introductory interest rates, maybe teaser rates, for what were called adjustable rates mortgages. And they would tell these middle class, lower middle class, upper lower class people, you too can get into a $3,000 a month mortgage, $5,000 a month mortgage, whatever. You could afford to do that. And there's some shared blame there. People should understand if they're making $30,000 a year, they probably can't buy a $300,000 a year house, even though the banks were telling them, yep, you can do that. And you can do that for a certain number of years. And then the rate balloons from X percent to a multiple of X. And in a certain world, in a perfect world, it kind of worked for a long period, because what would happen is during that teaser period, the housing prices and the value, the equity, kept going up and up and up and up. And if after 5 years you couldn't afford the balloon rate payments, you could sell the house, sell your interest in the house, and you still made money from it. But what happened if the housing market went down? If the price went down? Something that hadn't really happened since the Depression. Well, if it went down when it was time to refinance, you'd be what they called underwater. you wouldn't have the resources. Basically, you would owe more than the house was worth. And what people did, they just walked away. They walked away from these mortgages. And that really helped collapse the entire housing market. And that housing market really helped lead to a worldwide recession effectively in 2008, 2009. It was really a catastrophic spark for that financial crisis. Now, there's really an interesting scene dealing with Standard & Poor's. The head of Standard & Poor's is played by Melissa Lee, a wonderful actress. And Steve Carell, the Mark Baum character, goes to her and says, you're complicit. You knew about the problems. And she says, if we didn't give them the ratings they wanted, they'll go to Moody's. If we don't work with them, they'll go to our competitors. So there's really a lot of kind of complicity about this dirty little secret about how they were just repackaging crap effectively. Now, two minor characters in the movie, they're called Charlie and Jordan. They found out about this. They did some research. They bet against the housing market and really made a small fortune. That was brokered by Ben Rickert, who's played by Brad Pitt, and he was a former large investor in a large company before he retired. And he helped them kind of not manipulate, but get the instruments that they needed to get. And they made a small fortune off that, actually a pretty big fortune from that. And when they're celebrating, basically Brad Pitt tells them to stop celebrating. He says, you just bet against the American economy, which means that if we're right, people lose. People lose. They lose their homes, they lose their jobs, they lose their pensions. Suicide goes up, depression goes up, divorce goes up. So just stop dancing. I hope you enjoy the movie The Big Short, and I look forward to reading your discussions.